Hello, and we're back. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for joining me. Now we're going to be heading into the Parmenides. Let's get into it. Right, last time we finished off with this part here. Therefore, Antiphon said indeed that Pythagoras spoke to say. And we have this part here. We have us meeting Cephalus at the start of the text, running into Adimantos, who wants to know about Antiphon, who was friends with Pythagoras, who was there present at the conversation between these three lads. Our triad of wonderful people, great philosophers, Socrates, Parmenides, and kind of between the two. Socrates is about 20, Parmenides at around 60, and between the two is Zeno, who's around 40 years old. Right, how interesting. Which means we have reached the point of the text where it says, Antiphon said, Pythagoras spoke. So these two guys, Cephalus and Adimantos, who met him when he arrived at the Agora, the place of gathering in the town, tracked down Antiphon, who was dealing with horses now, and thankfully it had been the logos that he heard from Pythagoras had been a subject of his focused attention for a long time. So he still has it in his mind in some way, even though he's now into horses. And he's going to recount the story. So, who is speaking? Antiphon is speaking. And what is he? Who is he speaking through? Pythagoras. So Antiphon is recounting a conversation that Pythagoras had with him, and he says, "Thus Pythagoras spoke to say." So that's where we're at now. Antiphon is the narrator, and he's narrating what Pythagoras tells us. Now this is interesting. What does this tell us about the logos? Anything? Well, isn't it an interesting way of writing? Why not just say, this is what happened? Why does it have to be through somebody else and to another person? Why do we have to have this three-step process in the writing? Why is this triad with this middle term important in the logos? How confusing, right? Or it's a puzzle. We are adventurers on the philosophical quest, and we are looking for clues and hints and things that stand out as weird. Remember, this is like a video game. When you go into the room and there's one statue out of place or turned around the wrong way, that's weird. You don't ignore that. You take note of that. Oh, there's something to do with that statue. Maybe I can investigate it now and I find there's like a gem underneath it or something. Or maybe it'll come back later. Maybe this will come back later. Take it with you. Carry it with you. That's the game. So, interesting puzzle to start the whole thing. Back to the ancient text. Antiphon said indeed that Pythagoras spoke to say. At that time, Zeno and Parmenides arrived to celebrate the great Panathenaea. Celebration of some kind. What was that celebration? You might have to do some work. Go into Google. Or take that question with you and ask some Greek people or ask some philosophers. What is the Panathenaea? What was the significance of the Panathenaea? Thus, on the one hand, Parmenides was already quite well advanced in years, very grey-haired, but of beautiful and good appearance, most nearly about 65 years of age. But that, on the other hand, at that time, Zeno was nearly 40 years old, but very tall and graceful to see. And he was said to have come to be the dear friend of Parmenides. This is an introduction. We're noticing some key words already. We're noticing beautiful and good being described of Parmenides. Tall and graceful. Similar, same, but different. To do with Zeno. They're both older than Socrates, one's 65, one's 40, and he had come to be a dear friend. Now, what is the significance of that in philosophy? Friendship, and becoming a dear friend, a beloved friend. Then Pythagoras said that they lodged with him in the Ceramicus, outside the walls, where indeed Socrates also arrived. Here is our hero, Socrates. This is the big guy. Well, he's the young one here, but this is the start of the philosophical quest of Socrates. So we can really relate to Socrates here, because we are on this quest. We are starting as adventurers. We have come across this ancient text that we can see on the screen, and we're interested enough to have an open mind, have questions, and explore the Logos. So Socrates is our buddy right here. Socrates had also arrived here in Ceramicus, and many certain others with him. He's got a party, an adventuring party, who had set their heart upon hearing the written discourses of Zeno. For at that time, they first began to pay attention to his writings, where Socrates was very young at the time, since Socrates was very young at the time. Therefore, Zeno himself read to themselves, while Parmenides happened to be outside, so that only a small part of the discourses had remained to be read, when Pythagoras himself, together with Parmenides, came in from outside, and also Aristotle, who he himself said became one of the 30 tyrants. Okay, so what's happening here? Zeno is reading to themselves, and our translator one has helped us out by highlighting another case of altos. Why do we care about altos? It's the self. Equals self. Big deal. That's what we're looking for. Altos. The self. Hey, that's what we're after as philosophers. At least that's a big part of it, isn't it? Isn't that what makes things meaningful? It's to do with the self. So, we have the self coming up here already. Zeno read to themselves. So remember, we have the a triad of instances of what the word self means in the Greek. It has the particular, or it, or the subject of the sentence. And we have the honorific, the highest, or the highest excellence. And we have the self, which is the highest possible term in philosophy. So our question is, which one is meant here? Or why use it as an author? So, Zeno read to themselves. Maybe he's addressing the highest aspect of the people here. He's presenting his logos. Notice the word discourses. The Greek is Logon, logon. The logon is logos. So he is reading his logos to the highest part of the people there, Socrates and his adventuring party. He'd read most of it until only a small amount had remained when Pythagoras himself, with Parmenides, came in from outside, and also Aristotle. Now, important to know that Aristotle here isn't the Aristotle that we think of usually, or maybe isn't. Plato's student. So, Parmenides taught Socrates as we're reading here. Socrates taught Plato. Plato started the academy, started Platonic philosophy. And his student was Aristotle, who kind of missed the mark a lot and left and didn't realize that philosophy was a spiritual consciousness discipline. He was more of a materialist. He missed the mark, and Plato wouldn't promote him to the head teacher at the academy, and so he left and started his own school. Unfortunately, when we do philosophy at school now, it's kind of in Aristotle's tradition. That's a historical turning point. At any rate, we have Aristoteles is in the Greek. That means les. So that means little Aristotle, who became one of the 30 tyrants. That's a historical thing where 30 people became very tyrannical in Athens at the time, and he was one of them. So, there's a question. If Aristotle is hanging around with Parmenides and our friend Pythagoras, who's telling the story, and even Socrates, what happened to him that he became a tyrant? This Parmenides is like Super Gandalf, sharing the logos, sharing the greatest call to adventure. He's calling these people to the philosophical quest, the highest quest. What happened to Aristotle that he became a tyrant? This is a question. Put it in your inventory. Put it in your sack. Carry it with you. So, Pythagoras, who's telling the story, or rather, who's telling the story to Antiphon, who we're hearing it through. So Pythagoras came in with Parmenides, along with Aristotle, who became a tyrant, so that they had still yet to hear some small part of the writings. Not, however, Pythagoras himself, since he had indeed heard the discourses, the logos, from Zeno before. Okay, let's get rid of these highlighters because that's not cheap. Therefore, Socrates, having listened, he then urged him to read again the first hypothesis of the first logos. And having been read, Socrates said, okay, this is the first thing we hear about our friend Socrates. What does he do? How does he begin? He's like, I'll read again the first hypothesis of the first logos. So we're learning something here. The logo, he obviously had more than one logos written. What does that mean? And in his logos, he has a set of hypotheses. What does that mean? We don't know yet. That's interesting. Oh, we have a chatter in the chat. Hello. Avicina14, hello, welcome. How are you doing? We're in here beginning the philosophical quest, and we're reading Plato's book, the Parmenides, which is a story about how Socrates met his first teacher named Parmenides. Welcome to the stream. What we're doing is we are trying to discover the Logos. What is the Logos? It is a path that we can follow, a path of understanding that will lead us to our higher goals, which has its negative reflection that it can block us. But we're trying to learn about the Logos and follow the Logos. The Logos being a way of understanding, a system of understanding that can lead you to grasping the nature of the highest ideas. What is the good? What is the self? Why are we here? These sorts of things. What is the self? So it's a spiritual process in that it can awaken states of mind. You level up as a character, and the path that you follow is the path of understanding, specific kind of understanding called the Logos. And we're reading someone who wrote from the Logos, someone named Plato, an ancient Greek philosopher from about 300 BC. And by reading this ancient work, our minds are being drawn to the level of the mind of the author. So our mind becomes like the mind of Plato. And we can gain the messages that he's left for us, but also we're on the hunt to discover what exactly the Logos is, because that's what we're going to use in all areas of our life, in other texts, in discovering the problems that we face in our lives, in understanding why they're there, and in understanding how we can reach our highest, most significant goals. That ultimately leads to our destiny. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. If that is interesting to you in any way, I'll have yesterday's stream posted. And after this one gets posted, I did a bit of an introduction as to what philosophy is, why we should care. And this is the second half of the stream where we're actually in a text that has the Logos. So we're applying our mind to see the Logos that's there as closely as we can. Why? Because it can awaken our spirit, awaken the higher part of the soul that has the ability to grasp that which is most meaningful. That's the philosophical journey. We're adventurers on the call to the greatest quest, sometimes called the noblest quest, but the most misunderstood quest, which is why I'm doing this stream. Not a lot of people know about this. True philosophy, not opinions or my philosophy or your philosophy. True philosophy is something that has been hidden or buried for many, many years. But we are the adventurers on the quest to reawaken it. So we have Socrates at this place where Parmenides is. Parmenides came in from outside with Pythagoras, who's telling the story, and Aristotle, who himself became one of the tyrants. And now we know that our friend Pythagoras has heard these Logoses from Zeno before. So, let's go to the board. We have here Zeno as the student of Parmenides, and now we have Socrates coming to meet Zeno and ask him about his writings, ask him about his Logos. Hey, how do you understand things? So Socrates wants to know, hey Zeno, let's read again your first hypothesis of your first Logos. So we have some questions. What the heck is a Logos? That there are many of them. I thought Logos was your level of understanding. He's got more than one. And what does it mean to have a hypothesis within your Logos? Socrates said, hey Zeno, in what way do you mean this, O Zeno? That if the beings are many, Is it then necessary that they be both like and unlike? But this is certainly impossible, for it is not possible for the unlike to be like, nor for the like to be unlike. Do you not mean it in this way? You do not mean it in this way, do you? So, what a strange way of talking. So already we can pick out some interesting things about our friend Socrates. He's only 19 years old, and this is the start of his philosophical adventure, but already he knows certain key ideas. First of all, he knows what logos is. He knows something about a hypothesis. But he also knows what beings are. Now, this is one of the most important things that we can get in our heads about philosophy. The sorts of things that we hope to understand in philosophy, such as what is beauty, what is the soul, what is justice itself, not a beautiful thing, but beauty itself, what is reality. These are things called beings. And the Greek word here is ontos, or onto here. What are beings? Beings are the living creatures. Living creatures might be a bit weird. They're the objects that we can know. We talked about nous as a special kind of knowledge. Knowing them. They are the things that you can directly grasp for yourself through the eye of your mind, apprehending it directly in the spiritual experience. These are called the beings. So there's a certain spiritual experience, a certain realm that people can enter through this philosophical quest, opening our mind to this realm of being, and the objects you see there are the beings. They are immortal. They exist forever there. This is called the realm of metaphysics, because these are the ideas that had to exist before the physical world. Metaphysics means before physics. So Socrates is already has some, even as a young man, he already knows something about beings, which is fantastic. I don't know many people who know about beings, but Socrates did. So this is something that we need to be aware of, because this is what we're after too. We want to know the beings. We're after knowledge. So he asks, hey, these beings that you guys speak about, you're saying that they're many. Many of them. Earlier we talked about the difference between how our society currently thinks about philosophy, many philosophies. But if we're interested in truth, we want one philosophy, the truth. That's what we're doing here. Using the logos to awaken our minds to the logos and knowing the truth, the logos. So he's saying, well, hang on a second. If the beings are many, then it is necessary that they be both like and unlike. Okay, what does that mean? Well, like and unlike are two beings. That's weird for us in our current modern world, because we think of like and unlike as concepts. We realize that we use them in everything we do. Everything you look at is like something else and unlike other things. I mean, if you were looking at this pen, you have to say, oh, this pen is unlike the background, so I can distinguish it. But it's also like things in the background because it's a thing. It's like the other pens on my desk. But it's unlike them because it's a special kind of pen. So like and unlike are things that we use everywhere, at all times. We see through them, we use them in our thinking and our seeing. But in philosophy and for the ancient Greeks, they recognize that the things, these like and unlike, are not just concepts. They have a kind of existence prior to there being like and unlike pens, like and unlike capos, like and unlike guitar picks. The fact that our world uses them in everything says to the Greeks, oh, hang on a second, well, it must have existed prior to them being fundamental principles in our entire universe. Well, if they existed prior to the physical world, they must have some kind of non-physical or metaphysical existence. If they have a metaphysical existence prior to the physical world, they exist outside of time and space, because that time and space is the physical world, which means they are eternal and immortal. They don't have a body, so they're not going to die. They're out of time, so they're eternal. It's these eternal, immortal ideas or beings that we can therefore know. They're the objects of knowledge. They're the things you can know for certain, because you can't be mistaken about them once you experience them, because they are ultimate experiences. Because you're not seeing a like thing, a pen that is a like pen, like other pens, unlike other desk items. You are experiencing likeness itself. The experience of likeness itself is one of the things we hope to get as philosophers. That's one of the treasures we hope to earn on this quest. An understanding of and direct experience of likeness itself. So it's yours. You know it. And you can't be mistaken, because it's an ultimate experience of knowing. It's a spiritual experience, you could say. Although spiritual might be a loaded word. You don't have to use spiritual if you don't like. It's a knowing, it's a being experience. That's what we're after. That's why we're on this quest, because we can know them ourselves. We don't have to send someone else to experience and then they can come back and say, oh, by the way, let me tell you so you can have beliefs. No, not beliefs. Ours. Knowing. We are the adventurers. We are the ones on the quest. So that's what beings he's referring to. That's what it means in the Greek. And he's saying, well, if there are many, if the beings are many, is it then necessary that they be both like and unlike, because they are two beings? But this is impossible, for it is not possible for, notice the word the. The, not a example, but the. It is not possible for the unlike to be like, nor for the like to be unlike. You do not mean it in this way, do you? So he's got a good question. Now, we talked about the philosophical adventurer's quest to be having questions. To have questions is to be on a quest. And so here is Socrates with his friends, hunting down Zeno and Parmenides, and saying to Zeno, hey, I've read your work. Let's read the first one. The first part of your essay and the first hypothesis. He's going for right at the beginning. First hypothesis of your first logos. You say this. And what does he do? He's got a good question. How can it be that way? How can there be many beings, like and unlike, these beings that we experience? How can there be many? Because that means that the same beings are both like and unlike. But unlike can't be like, they're opposites. How can they both be eternal beings, but they're opposites? You can't have the unlike the same as the like. You can't have the like the same as unlike. That doesn't make any sense. Is that what you mean? And Zeno goes, yes, that is what I mean. Socrates says, is it not the case then that if it is indeed impossible that both the unlike be like, of course, hot can't be cold, they're opposites, and the like be unlike, it is certainly impossible that the many should also exist. And when we say exist, we mean exist eternally and immortally. That's the kind of existence we're talking about, because we're talking about philosophy here. He didn't hunt down blacksmiths, he hunted down philosophers. What are philosophers interested in? The things that are eternal. The real things, the things that we're after. Eternal soul, eternal likeness, eternal unlikeness. eternal reality, eternal mind, the self, meaning, these sorts of things. So, if it is indeed impossible that the unlike be like and the like be unlike, it is certainly impossible that the many should have this kind of existence. For if the many were to exist, they would undergo impossibilities. Is it then the intention of thine, of you, of your discourses, recognize the word logos? Logoi, that means logos, logoi. Is it then the intention of your logos, and no other one, than to struggle through all of the arguments to show that many do not exist? And do you consider each of thine logos to be a positive proof in support of your hypothesis that the many do not exist? The beings are not many. So that you are also led to think that you have produced as many positive proofs to show that the beings cannot be many, as you have composed logos to show the many do not exist. Let's read that again. So, do you consider each of your logos to be positive proof in support of your hypothesis, so that you are also led to think that you have produced as many positive proofs as you have composed logos to show the many do not exist? So every discourse, every logos you've written is nothing other than a positive proof that supports your hypothesis that the many do not exist. Because if they do exist, they would undergo impossibilities. Is that what you're doing? Do you mean it in this way? Or do I not understand you correctly, Zeno? Zeno replies, in no other way. You have understood quite well the intent of the whole work. So Zeno is saying, hey Socrates, you've got a good question there. You've done pretty good. You have understood the intent. My intent is to show that the beings cannot themselves be many, because they would undergo these impossibilities. The like would have to be different and many from the unlike, and they would have to both have a kind of existence, and they're both beings. So how can the beings be unlike and like at the same time if it's one single experience of the eternal? Doesn't make sense. Is that what you're trying to do? Yes, that's the intent. Each one of my logos is a proof to show that the beings cannot be many. But here he's saying it's just the intent. He's missing something. He's got the intent. Good on him. He's only a young kid. The intent of the whole. This is interesting because whole is one of those key words that will come up later. So Zeno is thinking in terms of whole. You may have got the whole, but you may have missed something in the past. So he's got the intent. He's a pretty sharp fella. Thank goodness he's on our team. I understand, O Parmenides. So now he's addressing Zeno's teacher, Parmenides. I understand, O Parmenides. Now Socrates is addressing Zeno's teacher, Parmenides. I understand, O Parmenides, that Zeno does not only wish to be situated in the close bonds of friendship with you, but also to agree with you in the following writings. For he has written in the same direction as you, although by changing certain particulars, he endeavors to deceive us that he is asserting something other. From the one hand, you assert in your poems that the all is one, and you produce sound proofs in a beautiful and good way in support of these hypotheses. But on the other hand, he says in turn the following, that the many is not. And then he produces very many and very mighty positive proofs. So he's calling him out. He's saying, hey, Parmenides, not only does he want to be good friends with you, in close bonds of friendship, but also to agree with you. Sounds like he's saying, hey, he's a butt kiss a little bit. He's kissing up to you a little bit. He doesn't just want to be your friend. He wants to agree with everything you say. Because while Parmenides is saying all is one, that's his claim. That all of the beings, maybe all of reality, everything that we will ever see or experience is actually one in some fundamental, profound, knowable way. And he produces sound proofs. It's not just a theory, he's proving it in a sound way, in a beautiful way, in a good way, supporting his hypotheses. See, this really highlights the fact that philosophy is both spiritual and intellectual. Those two words together, the word is intelligible, rational and knowable, because all is one. It's the sorts of things you might hear from people who have a spiritual experience or meditate or something like that. But the way he gets there is through proofs, the things that are often lacking in those groups. Equally so, the people who are used to making sound proofs, like academics, often miss the spiritual level to reality. So this is philosophy. This is the game we're in. Spiritual and rational. Intelligible. So all is one, and he's got good sound proofs. But on the other hand, while you, Parmenides, are saying all is one, your friend Zeno here is saying the many is not. Which is the opposite. One and many are a pair of fundamental terms. We had like and unlike, that's a pair. There are certain key ideas in philosophy, key beings, that come up in pairs. These we call self-er pairs. Because let's go to the notes. Remember that the word self has three parts. The particulars, like it, like a thing, pointing to a thing, the subject of a sentence. The honorific, you're not just saying this pen, the particular pen. You can say the honorific pen, the greatest pen ever to penness in the excellence of penness. Or let's worship this lovely pen. It is the best pen of all pens. That's the honorific. And the ultimate term, the self. That beyond any experience, the experience-er. So those are the three levels of the word altos, self. This middle term here, the honorific, is what we're looking at here. The honorific use of the self is why we call them self-er. S-E-L-F-E-R. Let's write that down. Self-er terms. There are some self-er terms that come in pairs. We've got two of them already, like and unlike. Socrates used these self-er terms in his question to Zeno. Hey, how can like and unlike be the same? So that doesn't make the sense. These are a pair of opposite terms, so they can't both be beings. Reality can't be these many different things, because the level of being, they're opposites. Is that what you're trying to say? So another self-er pair is one and many. Let's highlight them. Socrates is saying all is one. Make it pink. What? Socrates is making the case that all is one, and he is saying that your student Zeno is saying the same thing, because all he is doing is saying that the all is not many. He's denying the all is many, and you are affirming the all is one. So he's saying, Socrates is saying, hey, you two amazing philosophers, you're just saying the same thing, just the other side of the coin. Wow. Smart kid. And in this way, almost saying the same thing. Well, yeah, here he goes. You're almost saying the same thing. Each one speaks so as appear to have not said the same things. Thus, the latter discourses are revealed to us to be said in a way that is above and beyond our way of speaking. The latter discourses are revealed to us to be said in a way that's above our normal way of speaking. Because you're appearing to say things that are not the same, but you really are. But on a higher level, you're actually saying the same thing. Just appearing to us in a regular way of talking, and it seems to be different. Zeno replies, "Oh yes, Socrates, so it is, and thou hast, but you have not perfectly perceived the truth of my words." The truth, that's one of the things we're after as philosophers. So, take note, put it in your pocket. Why is Zeno using such a word like the truth in response? The truth. You have not perfectly perceived the truth of my words, although, just as Spartan hounds, you have indeed well pursued and tracked their intent. Did it right, but not quite there. But in the first place, this thus remains unnoticed by you, that the written words are not in every way so venerable. They're not that great. Like, you think that we're doing this amazing thing, but they're not so really that great, because so that it was written, as you say, with the intention of concealing from men, as if I was doing something of great importance. But on the other hand, well, I'm not trying to conceal I'm doing something of great importance. On the other hand, you have spoken something of those things that does happen to be the case. But on the other hand, the truth of the matter is indeed that these writings were composed for the purpose of providing a certain assistance to the logos of Parmenides. Oh, this guy knows something about the logos of Parmenides. That's what we're after. That's why we're reading the book. To discover the logos of Parmenides, which we're thinking is probably very close or the same as the logos. Because if it's not, then we can throw away the book. But if it is, then in trying to understand the logos of Parmenides, we are raising our state of mind to the state of mind of his, and that same level of participation in the logos. That's our quest. So he is providing some assistance to the logos of Parmenides. That's a big deal. Against those who try their hand at comically representing self. There's our self-word again. By asserting that if one is, many ridiculous and opposite results happen to the self-logos. Okay, this is a big turning point for us here. This is a doozy. We're only 6 pages in so far, and we have got something amazing. Removing some highlights here. So, his assistance to the logos of Parmenides, that's a big one. If we're after the logos, then certainly the logos of Parmenides is final boss kind of fair. It's like right up there. And he's doing it against people who try to comically represent the self. What? What kind of self does he mean? Does he mean to say it? He's trying to provide assistance to people who are trying to comically represent it, the subject of the sentence, it. People who hear his logos of Parmenides and are trying to comically represent it. Or is he saying that some people are trying to comically represent the highest excellence of his logos, his ultimate logos? Or is he saying that the people are trying to comically represent the self, our target, know thyself, the ultimate goal of the philosophical quest, the final treasure, the One Piece? Which of the three does he mean when he says that the people are trying to comically represent self? Now, we don't know. Not yet. But that's good. Because we're not supposed to know yet. We're supposed to be puzzled. And we're supposed to carry it with us. If we carry with us a question like this, what one does he mean? What kind of self? Then, when we discover something later that might point us in the right direction, we can have an aha moment, an insight, and that might change us. Because the Logos journey is one that presents itself through puzzles so that it can change us. Remember we talked about happiness? Things that we do in our lives because we think they'll make us happy. We get a degree or something because it'll make us happy. What do we mean by that? Is it a one-off thing? Is it just simple pleasure? Or do we think we're made happier because it will change us into a happier way of being? We will change our fundamental way of experiencing or viewing ourselves. So, in a similar way, if we have a question, an important question about the Logos, about the text we're reading, and we're carrying it with us, maybe when we come across something that answers the question, it will ping our brain. It will level us up. It will ding to the next level of our character. It will fundamentally change us, or our view of ourselves, or our experience of ourselves. That's why it's a personal development or a spiritual development quest that we're on. That's what makes it meaningful. It affects our self, makes us happier or better. That's why it's the best game in town. The only game in town, some say. So, with that in mind, it's a question. Which of these three kinds of self is he saying? Are they making fun of it, his work? Are they making fun of his highest logos, his highest understanding? Or is he making fun of the self? Because the word altos in Greek can mean all three. That's our question. Onward, adventurers, with our sword and shield in hand. The sword being our thinking and our shield being, I don't know, maybe the question that we have now. Let's see what we can do with it. So, I wasn't trying to conceal this from men as though I was doing something super important that I needed to hide away. But I was actually providing certain assistance to the Logos of Parmenides, wow. Logos of Parmenides, that sounds good. Against those who try their hand at comically representing, making fun of self. What self? By asserting that if one is, then many and opposite results happen. So they're saying, Parmenides, these people come across Parmenides' poems or his work, and Parmenides is saying, the all is one. And they're saying, well, if the one is, if all is one, being, another word for is being. We talked about what being means earlier. If being, eternity, if reality itself is one, they're saying, you think being is one, think one is, then all these ridiculous things will happen. Ha 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 ha, you idiot. These ridiculous things and these opposite things, all these many things will happen. Ha 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 ha. They're making fun of him. And Zeno wrote his work to try and provide assistance against that. So they're making fun of self. What kind of self? By asserting that if one is, many ridiculous and opposite results happen to the self logos. Whoa. It's gone from the logos of Parmenides to the self logos. Remember we talked about the significance of the word the? The makes it a substantive. We're not talking about a apple, an apple. We're talking about the apple. We're not talking about, hi, 11 Millie Bobby 1. What a name. Hi, 11 Millie Bobby 1. Hope you're having a good day. Oh, thank you. I think you're my first follower. Welcome. We are reading philosophy. We're discovering philosophy. This channel is about awakening ourselves to the philosophical quest, understanding what it is, and we are discovering it in the text of the Parmenides. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Basically speaking, the Logos is the path of philosophy. It's the greatest quest. Imagine, and the metaphor that I'm using is imagining we're video game characters. I'm from UAE, Dubai. Welcome. So, philosophy is the most important thing we can do in our lifetime. Why? It's a way of discovering our highest goals, awakening our destiny, and also we can, the way of reaching that is through discovering something called the Logos. The Logos is the understandable pattern in reality that if you apply your mind to understand it and use it, you can reach your highest goals and discover important things like what is beauty itself. Not a beautiful thing, but what is the beautiful thing itself? Or what is justice itself? Or what is reality or the soul? These are the ideas or the beings that we're seeking in philosophy. And what's good about philosophy is you don't have to believe anyone. You are the adventurer. You are on the quest. Each of these things you can know yourself and experience directly by following the Logos. We're developing our understanding of these things in a way that can awaken a higher part of our consciousness that can know these things and awaken us to our highest goals and our highest experiences. That's the Logos. So how do we do that? One way is by reading a text written by someone who's already an adventurer, further down that quest, someone who's gotten very close to the end of the path of the Logos, someone who's writing in the Logos and writing about the Logos. So if we find a book like that, then we can read it to learn what the Logos is, but while doing that, we can be pulling apart like a Sherlock Holmes. We can be discovering what exactly is the path. How are we reading it? Because we want to know what that is. Fortunately, we have an author who does write like that. He's a philosopher named Plato. And in this book, he's writing about his teacher Socrates, who also participates in the Logos to a high level. When he was 19, he met his teacher Parmenides. And this book is called the Parmenides. So that's what we're doing. We're unpacking the text and we're discovering for ourselves the Logos, the message, and what the Logos is itself. That's the quest. That's the human quest. They call it the noblest game. So, if you're interested in this, if you're interested in knowing the most important things, awakening philosophy in your world, please join us. If you have any questions, write them in the chat. This is the second video that I have. I'll be reposting the first one. So, and you can join the YouTube page. These videos will be going up on YouTube, so you can follow along. And of course, ask questions as we go. So far in the text, we have Socrates, who has come up with his buddies, his fellow adventurers, and they've tracked down this guy named Zeno. So 19-year-old Socrates has found this 40-year-old Zeno and said, hey, I came across your writing, and I've got some questions. Where am I from? I live in Australia. And Zeno, let me ask you some questions about your work. Because it seems like you're saying the same thing as your teacher. Your teacher, Parmenides, is saying being is one. Reality is one. And all you've said, Zeno, is reality can't be many. But one and many are opposites. They're a pair. They're called a selfa pair. So you're pretty much saying the same thing, right? And Zeno says, yeah. I was providing assistance to the logos of Parmenides, who is saying the all is one, against people who are trying to mock him. Hey, Parmenides, you think all is one? Well, that's silly. Look at all these ridiculous and opposite things that happen. But here is a turning point. This is a big, big moment. Because we were thinking, hang on a second. He is saying, I'm providing help to people who try to comically represent self. And we know in the Greek, the word self has three kinds of meanings. It, so he could be saying, they're trying to make fun of it, his poems. Or the honorific, which is the highest excellence. Like Zeno's, Achilles' shield, they would say, the self-shield. It's the greatest of all the shields. So are they making fun of it, his poem? Are they making fun of his highest logos? Or are they making fun of the self, which is the highest possible term? That's our question. And as philosophers on the quest, as adventurers, we carry questions. Questions are our skills. You level up by being able to get and carry questions. So we're asking, what kind of self does he mean here? These people try and make fun of self, which one? By asserting that if one is, many ridiculous and opposite things happen to the self logos. He's changed it. We know that the word the elevates things from the physical examples of things, a beautiful thing, to the beautiful. Now we're in the realm of being. We're in the honorific. We're looking at the thing itself. I don't speak English good. Oh, okay. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I can clarify for you if you like, buddy. Thanks for following too. I hope you're interested in philosophy. I hope you're interested in discovering the greatest quest that humans can be on. So it's changed from the logos of Parmenides. You can talk here if you want. Sure. So it's now the self logos. So whatever the logos of Parmenides is, Zeno is saying it's not just on chat. Okay. Cool. It's not just a logos, it's the logos of the self. So whatever Parmenides is writing about when he's saying it is one, has something to do with the self. That's significant, because the self in philosophy is the highest term. It's the most immediate, it's the most personal, but it's the most transcendent. In all of your experiences that you've had in your whole life, what's something that has stayed the same? The self. Wouldn't you say the self? It's still the self that's having it. But you'd be hard-pressed to point at something. Because your body has changed, your thinking has changed as you've grown up. But it's still you, it's still the same self. What is that self? It's the most immediate thing. But doesn't everybody have a self? I mean, when you ignore the particulars, people's hair color, people's skin color, whether they're a boy or a girl, If you ignore those different specifics, don't they have a self? Wouldn't we all have a self? What is the self that is the most immediate but the most universal? And in philosophy, transcends all experiences. So in every experience you've ever had, there's something having it. That's what we're after. That's the know thyself question of philosophy. Zeno was saying that they're making fun of not just the logos of Parmenides, but the self-logos. This is a game changer. This is where we can see, this whole book is changing now. It's on a whole different level. It's not just a student trying to defend people mocking his teacher's logos, his teacher's work. It's the self-logos. Isn't that interesting? I hope you find it interesting. I find it interesting. Truly then, this writing contradicts. This is still Zeno talking. So, I am trying to provide assistance to the logos of Parmenides against those who try to comically represent self. What self? By asserting that if one is, many and ridiculous opposite things happen to the self. Does that answer our question of what self he was referring to? Which one? It, highest, or thee? Oh, thanks, 11 Millie Bobby. The channel is quite new. This is only my second stream and nothing much on Instagram yet, but thank you for following. I hope you get into philosophy, man. I don't know if you're a man. I hope you get into philosophy. I hope this is interesting to you. I've got a YouTube as well. These videos will be posted on YouTube, so you can follow along and ask questions there. And it's philosophy is your quest. I'm a girl, by the way. My name is Emily. Hi, Emily. Well, Emily, I hope that you discover something interesting in philosophy because it's for you. It's your birthright. It's a way that you can awaken the highest parts of yourself. Or maybe just find it interesting and you like interesting things. So we had a question. Which self did he mean? Did he mean it? Did he mean the highest? Or did he mean the? And we carried it with us until we saw that he called it the self-logos. What was that like? Did that affect you in some way? Did you have that question? Did seeing a possible, a hypothetical, a hypothesis answer to that question change you, affect you? Was it cool? Was it fun? We want lots of those. Truly then, this writing contradicts the advocates of the many. The people who want to say it's many. Reality is many. Self is many. And opposes this and many other such opinions. We talked about opinions, didn't we? By being willing to make clear that the hypothesis that asserts that many is, the opposite of one is, by making clear that the hypothesis that asserts that many is will undergo and experience even more absurd consequences than the one that asserts that the one is. If any one of them is sufficiently gone through in detail. So you're saying, hey, you're making fun of the idea that self is one? And you're saying absurd things to say for all oneself, if everything is oneself and of oneself? You're making fun of that? By saying absurd things happen? Well, if you think that one is many, send you mass on Insta. What's mass? He's saying that, if you think that self is many, even more absurd things will happen. That's what he was doing in his writing. If any one of their claims have sufficiently gone through in detail. Therefore, Socrates, says Zeno, it has escaped your notice, O Socrates, that this discourse, which was composed by me when I was a youth, through such a thing indeed as the love of contention, and the writing itself was stolen by someone, so that I was not able to consult whether self should be brought out or led into the light or not. Wow, Zeno's really laying it out for us, saying, hey, you got the intent of mine. Let me get rid of these highlights later on, because hey, you got the gist of me. I am taking the opposite side of my teacher Parmenides, but it was because I had a love of contention. You might notice in the Greek here the word philo. Philo is the same as philosophia, philosophy, the same start of the word. Prefix. Philos means love. So while philosophia is the love of wisdom, philos Nikain, Neikain, Nikain, philo-nikain is the love of contention. My Greek isn't amazing, so I might not have pronounced that right. But he's saying, when I was younger, I had a love of contention. I wanted to fight people. I wanted to argue. But that was because I was young. And that's what happens sometimes in philosophy. So, as fellow adventurers, if you are picking up this quest, if you are interested in philosophy for all the wonderful reasons you should be aware that once you start getting good at it, once you start to pick up the logos, once you start to level up your skills, don't try and gank people. All right? Don't try and don't use your ability or your skills or your seeing of the logos to fight and argue with people. Don't be a jerk. That's what he's saying. Because I was, says Zeno. I was a jerk. I had a love of fighting people. And now that I could argue well and I could see well, I could see better than I used to, see better than others, I was like wanting to argue with people just for the sake of arguing, for a love of contention. So I wasn't, he said, before he said, you have understood quite well the intent of my works, Socrates. But it wasn't so wonderful, so venerable, like you think it was. So I had to try and conceal it, because it was so great. What it actually was a love of contention. I was young. I wanted to argue. I didn't like that people were making fun of my teacher and the idea that self is one. So I wrote these things to say that, to make fun of them. Hey, you think that's silly? Well, you're even more silly if you think that that the self is many. If the many is, and then he said that it was stolen. Again, we have the word self. Our author has put it in purple to help us see it. A-U-T-O, alto. So, his writing self, which self? It. The English is itself. But the writing, his greatest writing, could it be the honorific? Or was he writing about the self? Which of the three? Remember our three? It, highest, or thee? Which of them was stolen? So he was not able to consult whether self should be brought out or led into the light. So, we have some more questions. Who was he consulting with? Or who would have he consulted with if his work wasn't stolen? And what does he mean by stolen? Was he not looking after it, or really? Did someone go in and steal his papers? If he was so in love of contention and he put all his work into making fun of the people who were making fun of his teacher, why would he not want to release it? He didn't get to consult whether self, again, whether it should be brought out into the light, or whether his work about the self, is his logos about the self, should be brought out or led out into the light or not. Now, we have another key thing that we need to look for as philosophers. Led into the light. That is a fantastic metaphor. Notice we have to ask ourselves, why did Plato not just say, I was not able to decide whether whether this paper should be released or not. He could have said it that way, but he didn't. He said whether self should be led out into the light. Why? Why use this strange metaphor about leading things or people into the light? Why? Is that significant? Take note of this metaphor, leading into the light. We haven't got into the Republic yet, but you might be aware of the cave analogy, where someone is in the cave, a dark cave with only firelight, seeing a realm of shadows, to refer to what it means to be in the physical world, the shadow world. And what do we want to do as philosophers? What's our adventure? To leave the cave and get led out into the light of the real world. Now that's in the cave analogy. It might be a coincidence that it's also here. That he didn't say, I had to decide whether or not it should be released. He used the metaphor released into the light, or led out into the light. And not just released to the public. So, could be a coincidence. But we're not really in the game of coincidences as philosophers. We have our Sherlock Holmes hats on, and we're looking for patterns, repetition, symmetry. So, we have another question to put into our bag. Why led out into the light? Isn't this cool? Isn't this fun? I think so. It has, says Zeno to Socrates, it has escaped your notice, I say, that it was not composed by the love of honor, which belongs to a more advanced period of life. Now we're getting some information. So as we level up in philosophy, we might find ourselves going through stages of character development. Once we start learning about the logos, we might have a love of arguing with people. When you start to see more of the truth, you might get irritated at people who are making fun of the truth, making fun of people you care about, and you want to argue with them. You want to show how they're actually saying stupid things, like Zeno. But then he said, well, actually, I went from philo contention to philo honor. In a more advanced, when I leveled up, I wasn't really interested in fighting anymore. I was more interested in honor. But it belongs to a more advanced period of life. Whereas by a juvenile love of contention, there you go, when you're young, when you're little. Although, just as I have said indeed, thou does not conjecture amiss. Socrates, you missed it. Socrates, what you're saying is okay about my intent, but you missed about what I was trying to do. That Socrates, as a philosopher, you're going to go through stages. You, reading us, we all, as the philosophers, we're going to go through stages. Take notice. Right? If you play, I use the word ganking. If you play role-playing games, sometimes you might notice that certain people, once they reach a higher level, want to start killing the lower level players, ganking them, you know. We don't want to do that. Or in your life, when you start to learn some philosophy, you might want to argue with people or get irritated at people who are being unfair in comically representing the truth. But take notice, Socrates, take notice, listener. This is an early level of development. The next level is a love of honor. Other than that, you didn't miss the mark too much, says Zeno. You did not conjecture amiss. Socrates responds, I admit it then. I am led to believe that the case is just as you stated it. I'm saying you instead of thou, because thou's kind of Old English. Socrates, oh, he's young, so I'm going to do young voice. I admit it then, and I am led to believe that the case is just as you stated it. But explain to me about the following particulars. Do you not consider that there is a certain idea? What does idea mean? Doesn't mean concepts. This is important. Let's put it on the board. Idea. What does idea mean in the Greek? Or eideos? What is the Greek spelling? E-I-D-O-S. E-I-D-O-S. Eideos or idea means to behold. To behold. Idea is not idea. Sounds kind of the same. Idea is kind of the opposite, really. Idea is a concept. Idea is not. It's something you behold. And what do you behold? Oh, let's do a different color. Let's go blue. What do we behold? We behold being. The different aspects of pure being. Or we could say the metaphysical realm. That's what we behold. That's what we can grasp with. Let's add some more to the board. With what? With what? Nous. The English word is knowledge, but it's not really knowledge the way we think of knowledge. What do we behold? The aspects. By aspects we mean pure being is according to Parmenides, it's one. It's not many different experiences, but it has aspects within it. The same spiritual experience, the same pure light of being, or pure being, has qualities, kind of, as a oneness, that we can behold with nous, which is the whole thing we've been talking about, which is why we care about philosophy. And the word to behold means idea. This is key. We have to grasp this to follow what's going on. And isn't it interesting that as only a 19-year-old, Socrates already had a familiarity with all of these ideas? He must have known idea. He must have known the idea of beholding. So he probably has an idea of being and nous. Isn't that cool? Isn't it interesting? Now, you may have noticed something else. Remember how only a few moments ago we talked about asking the question, holding the question. Why did he say, why did he use the strange expression, he didn't know whether or not self should be led into the light? Remember that? Well, let's go back here. Another word for the pure spiritual experience that we can behold as an idea is aspects of the brilliant light of pure being. The brilliant light of pure being. That's the object of knowing, of beholding in philosophy. So, does that play a role in him talking about whether self should be brought out into the light through his sharing of his logos? That he didn't know whether he should share it because he seemed to be loving contention and maybe not loving honor? It's a good question to ask. And we're all about questions. Let's keep going. So this was all to explain, to make clear to bring out into the light what is meant by the word eideos, or idea. Socrates asks, explain the following particulars. Do you consider that there is a certain idea of likeness, a certain beholding purely with nous, this aspect of the brilliant light of pure being, and the aspect you're beholding, the one that stands out the most, is likeness? Self according to self. That's a Greek expression. Again, self. Which of the three self? The honorific. Self according to self. The highest possible idea of likeness. Isn't there such a thing? And there's another one that is such as this, but opposite, that is in turn an unlike idea. But that you and myself and all other beings, which we surely call many, yeah, you and me are many, aren't we? We have a share in these two beings. We share in them. And that on the one hand, those that share of likeness, participate in that pure idea of likeness, become like. Hey, don't we become like? We must be sharing in this idea. And according to that, the degree that such beings may share in this. Oh, okay, let me read that again. We share, you and me and all of these other many people, many beings, we share in these two beings, such that on the one hand, those that share of likeness become like, and according to the degree that such beings may share in it. The more you share in likeness, the more you become like. But those that share in unlikeness become unlike. But those that share in both become both. Therefore, if all also share in both opposite beings and are both like and unlike themselves by participating in both, then what's wonderful? What's so special about saying that? Because on the one hand, For if on one hand anyone brings to light that the like selves become unlike, and the unlike selves become like, then I think that would be monstrously absurd. Hey, if you like something, you don't become unlike. That's absurd. But if, on the other hand, if someone were to bring to light that those that participate of both of these ideas undergo both of these conditions, then as far as I'm concerned, Zeno, it does not appear to be out of the ordinary. Hey, if you participate in both, you undergo both. That's not strange. For indeed, if anyone would show that all are one by their participation of the one, then that these same selves are many also, in turn by partaking of multitude, plurality. So, it's not out of the ordinary to say that if you have participate, again, participation is a key word. Take note of that word, participation. He's saying that things happen to us because of the idea of participation. Participation in what? Participation in these ideas, these metaphysical aspects of this pure light of being that's eternal and immortal. But to say that those that participate in both undergo both, that's not out of the ordinary. If anyone was to show that all are one by their participation of the one, and that these same selves are many by partaking in manyness, but if someone were to show that this self, I highlighted it because it's the word self, this self which is one is many, and in turn the many are indeed one, I would immediately wonder at this. So he's pointing out something that he's going to wonder about. That's interesting. Why? Because wondering is part of the philosophical journey. To be curious about something, to wonder about something, that's a good state of mind. Remember, state of mind and understanding, that's the logos, it's both. So a state of mind of wondering is important. But he's saying that, well, if you go ahead and say that the self that is one is many, and also that the many is one, which are opposites, I would wonder at this. And similarly, in all other cases, if on the one hand someone could bring to light an argument worthy of admiration by showing that both the generic and the ideal selves, the particular examples like you and me here, and the ideal selves, the pure beings, undergo these opposite experiences themselves. Again, selves all the way through. So he's saying he'd immediately wonder at that. If the one that is the self that's one is many, and the many is one, that would be curious to him. He'd wonder at that. And if you would bring to light an argument worthy of admiration that shows that either the generic or ideal selves undergo these opposite experiences themselves, he'd wonder at that also. But if, on the other hand, someone demonstrates that I am both one and many, what would be wondrous about that? And demonstrates this assertion by saying, on the one hand, that when he wishes to bring to light that I am many, that the parts on the right side of me are other from the parts on the left, and the front parts are other from the back parts, and in like manner the upper from the lower. For I think that I partake in manyness. Hey, that's obvious, isn't it? That's not wondrous. I got different parts, so I must be many. But on the other hand, when he brings to Let's get rid of the highlighting. Gee, I highlighted a lot of parts when I read this last time. But on the other hand, when he brings to light that I am one, he should say that since there are 7 of us here talking, I am one man and participate of the one, so that in this way he should bring to light the truth of both these assertions. He's saying that's not wondrous. Say I'm one and many. Of course, I've got many parts, my right hand to my left hand, that's many. But all of us here are one person, so we're all one. So in some way we participate in the pure idea of one. So I'm one and you're one. But also we participate in the pure idea of many. I got different hands. That's not wondrous. Thus, if anyone should try to bring to light that stones and wood and such particulars are both many in one, we would say that self exhibits to our view such things as are many in one. So yeah, you did it well, yeah. Wood and stones and stuff, that's right, yeah. But that he does not show that the one. So he's gone from particulars. Yeah, of course stones and wood are many different pieces of wood, but also they're each one. Yeah, you can show us, we can see that. But you're not showing that the one is many. The one itself. The honorific. The idea. The aspect of pure being, that which is knowable. That's the significance of the word the. Right, so Socrates is roasting these guys here, and he's saying, hang on a second. Maybe not roasting. He's expressing his puzzlement with fellow philosophers. Right, if you show that woods and stones and other such particulars are both many in one, we would say that you've shown yourself has exhibited to our view such things are many in one, but you do not show that the one is many, or the many is one, nor speak of anything wonderful. Hey, it's obvious, it's not wonderful, unless you say this. But we would agree to that which is affirmed to all. Anyone, we would agree with that, what everyone sees about stones and rocks. But if on the one hand, anyone would first divide and separate these ideas apart, the ideas in English is capitalized because look, see the E-I-D-N? E-I, not just idea as concept, capital I here. The ideas, the aspects of the pure light of being, the metaphysical experience, the spiritual experience, that which is eternal and immortal, that which is metaphysical before the physical realm. All of the principles, the pure ideas that are used as principles for the physical. If someone would go out of their way to first divide all those ideas apart, separate them apart, those of which I've now been speaking, selves according to themselves, themselves alone, that's what selves according to selves mean in the Greek, separate not how they function or how they mix with others, but just separate them apart, themselves according to themselves, such as likeness or unlikeness itself, and manyness, and the one, and rest and motion, and all such as these, and then reveal himself as being able to blend together and separate apart the selves in themselves. So keep in mind, selves means the thing itself, the honorific, motion itself, like the pure concept, or not concept, that's wrong, it's the opposite, the pure beingness of motion. And notice we got a group of self pairs. So the sorts of ideas that can be beheld within the pure enlightenment experience, the pure light of being, these are the ones that can be given the honorific of self, likeness itself. And these are the ones that are the pure ideas we need to use to discover the self. Because we never see ourself. Like you never look in the mirror and, oh, that's myself. You might say, oh, that's my eyes or my nose. Likewise, you might see another person's nose or eyes, but you won't see their self or smell it or hear it. So there's something we have to use. We're developing an understanding of these key ideas that are called selfer ideas, selfers, so that we can then use it in our philosophical quest to grasp the nature of the ultimate, the self. What are you really? So that's the two kinds of use of self here. The self's likeness itself in the honorific, meaning the metaphysical, and the self is something that's not really being spoken about here. Maybe it was mentioned earlier when we talked about the self-logos of Parmenides. So, if someone would first divide these ideas apart themselves, such as likeness and unlikeness, manyness and the one, notice they're pairs? So it's a set called self pairs. Likeness and unlikeness, manyness and the one, rest and motion, a new set of pairs. We haven't mentioned rest and motion yet. We have mentioned the other likeness and unlikeness, manyness and one. And then reveal yourself. Interesting. Zeno talked about revealing his work, bringing it into the light. Then reveal yourself as being able to blend together and separate apart selves in themselves. Ooh, balloons. Then I would indeed be in wondrous admiration. That's what Socrates is after. That's what's going to make him in wondrous admiration. Oh, Zeno. Thus, on the one hand, I am led to think that we should strenuously labor in the investigation of these particulars. But yet, on the other hand, it would be deserving of much more admiration if anyone could solve the following puzzle. As I said about this ousia self. Removing highlighting. That is woven together into the ideal idea selves in a manifold way, just as you demonstrated in detail about the objects we see by the faculty of sight. If you could also in the same way demonstrate in detail about the ideas we grasp by the activity of the logos. Wow, okay. This is a big one. I think maybe this is where we're in for today, because this is a huge one. Socrates is laying down his position. He's laying it all on the table. He's saying, look, he said, hey, is this what you're doing, Zeno? Are you just saying the same thing as Parmenides and trying to act cool about it? And he goes, oh, well, that's my intent, but not because I was doing something honorable, but because I was young and in a love of contention. But yeah, I'm trying to say that the ideas can't be many. And Socrates is saying, okay, hang on a second. How can they be one? How can the ideas be one? Because they're different ideas. There's likeness and unlikeness. If there are these ideas that exist, pure existence, eternally immortal, that we can behold as ideas through the ousia. He mentions ousia later on, but that's the organ of the mind that can know these things. If there are things that exist and we can know, how can they be one? Because you're saying that likeness and unlikeness are one. They're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. They're different. Same thing as one and many. They're opposites. How can you say that's one? That sounds ridiculous. I mean, you could say, well, in our world of particulars, in our observational world, we can say, well, I have many parts, so I participate in manyness. So I've got two hands, my right is different from my left. But also I participate in the one because I'm one person, and you're one person, and all seven of us are one persons. That's not wondrous. You could say the same thing about stones and pieces of wood. That's not wondrous. But what I really want to hear, what I want from you guys, you big shot philosopher dudes, what I want to do, what I want to hear, and what I will really wonder about is if you can say that the ideas themselves, not an example, not a particular like wood and stone, but the ideas themselves in that realm of idea, how can they be separated apart and say that they are different beings, but also blended together to say that they're one if they're opposites? Do that for me. That's what I want to see. Hey, maybe this idea of maybe you can have this pure beholding of the ultimate, eternal, pure light of being and say, wow, I experienced pure likeness. And maybe another person can have the same experience, but experience it in a different kind of a way or different aspect of it. I like the metaphor of gravity. When you're falling out of a plane, you're still experiencing all of the same laws of physics, but the aspect of the laws of physics that you're noticing the most is wind resistance, because that's the one you're really it's present for you in that jumping out of the plane experience. And if your parachute doesn't open, well, the aspect, you're still experiencing all of the laws of physics, but the aspect that will really stand out, and if your parachute doesn't open, is gravity. Or, I don't know, sudden stopping of motion. Or inertia, because you hit the ground. In a similar way, you can have that experience of pure being and behold it with ousia, with the aspect of your mind that we call ousia in Greek, as likeness and unlikeness. That could be the thing, right, that you're experiencing the most. So you could say that these are beings that exist. But how can you blend them together as one, but also separate them apart and see that they have their own kind of existence? How can they be both? It doesn't make sense to me. It does with rocks and physical things. Yeah, sure, we participate in both, that's fine. But the things themselves, the ideas, selves according to selves, just themselves, likeness and unlikeness, manyness and one, rest and motion. If you can reveal yourself as being able to blend them together and separate them apart, themselves in themselves, then indeed I would be in wondrous admiration of that, O Zeno. Please. Thus, on the one hand, I am led to think that we should strenuously labor in the investigation of these particulars. But yet, on the other hand, it would be deserving of much more admiration if anyone could solve the following puzzle. He's sharing his puzzle with other philosophers. That's part of what we have to learn to do as philosophers. Get puzzles, develop questions, share those puzzles. He's sharing his puzzle. Solve this following puzzle, as I said, about this ousia self that is woven together in the ideal selves. So, ousia is, when we're talking about those ideas, those different aspects of the eternal, metaphysical, purely existing experience. Their quality is ousia. We talked about ousia being the faculty of the mind that can experience them, but it's through likeness, because they are also ousia. Their nature is pure mind, turning about upon itself at all points. So while we have an ousia, we participate in ousia ourselves, in that we have that sense that needs to be awakened, that can turn about and experience this, so too those ideas have that as their nature. So Socrates is saying, hey, these ousia selves, these purely existing selves that are woven together, this ousia self that's woven into, hey, all of these ideas, these different ideas like rest and motion, likeness and unlikeness, they all have ousia. It's woven into all of them. That's why we call them being. But just as you demonstrated in detail about the objects we see through our sight, if you could do the same thing, demonstrate in detail about the ideas which we grasp not through the sight, we don't grasp the ousia self and the idea selves through our sight like we do rocks and wood, stones and wood. We're not talking about everyday crap. We're talking about the real stuff. Bring them together, the stuff that have ousia woven into all of them, the ousia stuff. If you can separate them together and show that they're individual ideas, but also blend them together, how they can be many in one, about the ousia selves, the ideas selves, the honorific ideas, just as we talked about with rocks and stuff, but not the ones through sight, like rocks and stones and wood, but demonstrate that in detail about the ideas that we grasp, not through sight, but through the activity of the logos. That's a fantastic clue for us. That's a big insight for us. Why? Because these ousia selves are what we want to grasp and understand. We want to know the one self, the many self. We want to know pure rest and pure motion itself. But how do we grasp them? How do we get there? Socrates is saying, hey, you don't get there through sight. You grasp them through the activity of the logos. That's what we have been talking about these last two vlogs, podcasts, read-alongs. That's what we've been talking about. What is philosophy? It's a quest. It's a quest to know those things that are knowable. How do we do it? Is it a quest like using your objects of sight? Do you develop muscles and go on a plane and get a sword and whack monsters? No. Our quest, the human quest to discover the self, the one self, the many self, the likeness self, that which is eternal, is through the activity of the logos. And that's what we're learning as we're going along. We're trying to read the logos of Socrates and Parmenides and Plato, the author, to get their individual messages, but at the same time we are learning ourselves the activity of logos. Why? Because it's the activity, it's that through which we grasp the ideas. It's our method. It's the spiritual method. If this is the spiritual realm, if you could say ontos, the realm of the eternal, pure ideas, is that which is the spiritual, experienced by the soul or the spirit or ousia, then you can say, well, if we grasp it through the activity of the logos, that is the true spiritual quest. That's the philosophical quest. That's why it's the noblest game. That's why it's the only real game in town. That's why I'm sharing these videos, and that's why I hope you come along with me. I hope this has been fun. I hope you found something to get curious about. I hope there are some things it's not all going to make sense to you. Let it wash over you. Pull out the puzzles that stick out to you. Get puzzled. Get curious. Hey, what thing's going to be wondrous for you? Socrates, that's not wondrous, but that is. That's kind of obvious. I can see that already about stones and wood. But this is what I want to hear. Get your own puzzles. Be a Socrates yourself. What's going to make you wonder? What's going to make you curious? What's going to make you puzzled? So that you can do what? Exercise the activity of the logos. Try and solve those questions. Wonder about those questions. Use the logos. Use reasoning, questions, reflection, what's ousia? Reflecting on the self. Reflect on yourself. Reflect on your puzzles. Reflect on your ideas and put them into words. That's the activity of the logos. That's the way through which we can grasp these ideas. That's how we level up. That's how we can answer these questions that we're here to answer. That's how we can discover our destiny. And later on, we can apply that equally to the blocks that get in the way, to remove our blocks. And that's the human quest. To remove the blocks that lead us to our fate and develop the activity of the logos that will lead us to our destiny. What we've been saying all along, we're seeing it in black and white, and blue and red and green, and yellow and purple. Right here in the text, in this ancient scroll. As true as it was over 2,500 years ago, it's true today. We are here to discover it. We are here to reawaken it. We are here to share it with anyone we think might be interested. Hey, Socrates walked a long distance with his chums to find these guys and ask these questions, and challenge them on their logos, challenge them on their understanding of these ideas. So this is what I'm actually interested in. This is what I'm going to find interesting. You can do it too. Join the crew. Join the party. Join the group. Join the quest of philosophers to use the activity of the logos to discover these ideas of the self. If you want. It's a call to action. Remember that? It's a call to action. It's a call to adventure. Call to adventure on the hero's quest. And it's fun. It's fun. I'm sharing my level of seeing. I'm sharing what I've seen so far in my 20 odd years of studying philosophy. So it's not all going to resonate, but that's okay. Take what resonates. Leave the rest. Become puzzled. It's for you to level up. This is a way of being. The more we read it, the more we'll see, the more we'll practice the activity of the logos, the more we'll learn the activity of the logos, the more we'll learn what the logos is, and the better we can do the activity. What are we doing? Seeing the nature of the logos and how it functions, the activity of the logos. We're doing both. What's Socrates asking? Separate these ideas themselves and see how they blend together in themselves, not in their activity of how they make a stone different or pieces of wood many in one, but themselves, in their nature. What's the nature of these ideas and how do they blend together? The activity of the logos. Been a lot of fun. I hope you found it fun. If you have any questions, please please leave them in the comment section. Like and subscribe, all those things. Follow. I live stream these talks. These are these podcasts on Twitch. You can follow me on Twitch. It's at Awakening Philosophy. The link will be underneath. You can follow on YouTube as well. Lots of fun, right? The most fun, the noblest fun. I'll see you next time, fellow adventurers. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.